Chapter 2. The Taste of Contentment. The flowers were beautiful, Steffany had to admit that. They sat in a neat bouquet on her kitchen counter, roses and lilies, wrapped in delicate green paper. The kind of bouquet that said, "I'm sorry," without saying anything at all. Max had delivered them himself, his eyes full of apologies, but somehow it wasn't enough. The sight of him standing there had filled her with a heavy emptiness, and the flowers, lovely as they were, did nothing to lighten it. She had put them in a vase, more out of politeness than anything else, and now they stared at her from across the room as she sat at her small dining table, picking at her dinner. Max had stayed, insisting on cooking something simple, hoping to make amends. But now, as they sat across from each other, the silence was thick and awkward, their attempts at conversation falling flat. Max tried, of course. He made small talk, asked her about her day, and she tried to reciprocate, but her mind kept drifting back to the trattoria, to the warmth of the pasta, the way each bite had filled her with comfort and satisfaction. She thought of the way the creamy dip had embraced each crispy noodle, the warmth that had spread through her with every taste. She found herself wishing she were there instead, alone, with that perfect plate of pasta. "Steph?" Max's voice broke into her thoughts, and she blinked, looking up at him. He was watching her, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile, nodding. "Yeah, I'm fine," she said, though her heart wasn't in it. Max sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I feel like you're not really here," he said, his voice soft. Steffany looked at him, and for a moment she felt a pang of guilt. He was trying. But she couldn't help the way she felt. That emptiness, the sense that something fundamental was missing. She wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that she just needed something different, but she didn't have the words. Later, after Max left, Steffany found herself standing in her kitchen staring at the flowers. They were beautiful, but they didn't make her feel anything. Not like the pasta had. She went to bed that night feeling restless, the memory of the trattoria pulling at her, calling her back. It was like a yearning that she couldn't quite place, a longing for that warmth, that comfort. She tried to ignore it, to push it away, but it lingered, even in her dreams. The next day, she found herself back at the trattoria. She hadn't planned on going, but as she walked through the door, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The familiar warmth of the restaurant wrapped around her like an embrace, and she took a deep breath, feeling her body relax. The waiter recognized her, giving her a knowing smile as he led her to her usual table. "Back again?" he asked, his tone teasing. Steffany smiled, a blush colouring her cheeks. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted. He nodded as if he understood, and a few minutes later he returned with the dish that had brought her back. The plate of crispy, chewy pasta, the creamy dip beside it, steam rising gently from the warmth of it. Steffany's heart gave a little flutter as she looked at it, the sight of the golden noodles sending a rush of excitement through her. She picked up the first piece, her fingers grazing its crispy edges, and dipped it into the creamy sauce. She watched as the sauce clung to the noodle, thick and rich, before bringing it to her lips. The first taste sent a shiver through her. It was better than she remembered, warm and rich, the crispness giving way to a satisfying chew. The creamy dip melting into something decadent and comforting. She closed her eyes, a soft sigh escaping her lips as she savoured the flavour. It felt like an indulgence, something almost sinful in the way it filled her, the warmth spreading through her chest, her body. She dipped another piece, watching as the creamy sauce enveloped it, the sight of it making her pulse quicken. She brought it to her mouth slowly, letting her lips part as she took it in, her tongue savouring the way the flavours melded together. It was intimate, the way the pasta seemed to know exactly what she needed, the way it filled her, the warmth and richness of it spreading through her, reaching every part of her. Steffany found herself sinking into her seat, her body relaxing, her mind drifting. She dipped another piece, the creamy sauce almost dripping as she brought it to her lips, and she couldn't help the soft moan that escaped her as she tasted it. It was as though each bite was made just for her, crafted to bring her pleasure, to fill her with something she couldn't find anywhere else. It was erotic, in a way she hadn't expected. The way the warmth spread through her, the way her body responded to the simple act of eating, the satisfaction that settled deep inside her. She felt her skin warm, a blush rising in her cheeks as she took another bite, her eyes fluttering closed. She lost herself in the dish, in the warmth and richness of it, in the way it seemed to know exactly how to comfort her, to bring her pleasure. She didn't think about Max, or about the empty conversation they'd had the night before. She didn't think about anything, except the way each bite made her feel whole. As she finished the last piece, Steffany leaned back in her chair, her body feeling loose and relaxed, her heart full. She opened her eyes, the world around her coming back into focus, and she smiled to herself. She had found something here, something real, something that didn't ask anything of her, didn't demand she be anything she wasn't. It was just pasta, simple, comforting, perfect pasta. And for Steffany, that was more than enough.